we don't worry too much about how we categorize bikes for Bible. The difference between trail and XC is in the eye of the beholder. What's important is where and how you ride. And, well, we rode the Fezzari Signal Peak in Park City, Utah, but we rode it in a way that's a little beyond the cross-country label Fezzari gave it.
A lot of people are calling that a cross-country bike these days.
Yeah.
That's at what you would consider the upper limit of the cross-country race bike spectrum, right?
Which I think is a testament to how efficient and responsive suspension has gotten over the past couple of years.
But there's something about this bike that feels uniquely uncross-country for being a 120 bike. I rode it on a video mission. We were pretty out there. I mean, it was a little more rugged and a little more high speed than even the test course that we were on. And it didn't have that the suspension's only there when you need it kind of feel like a cross-country race bike is. Like, it's a suspension that's there for you.
It's a lot like, so we had a LaSalle Peak last year, and that bike was one that I really liked the suspension on. It's a lot more travel, and it felt to me like it was one of those bikes that I was putting more and more and more sag into it and still having trouble getting through all the travel because of how much it ramped up towards the end. This is very much like that too. It's got a pretty compliant upper end of the suspension, still got a good platform that you can pedal from, but I was running it at 30% sag, which if you're going to go with the cross-country-ish thing is sort of squidgy, and I still didn't really ever clank it to bottom out, and it was rough where we were riding it. So yeah, it's sort of traily. It feels a lot more traily than it does cross-country to me.
At the same time, for it feeling rather traily, at least for me, I felt like when I stood up and really wanted to crank on the bike, it had a lot of get up and go.
Well, I'm a little bigger than you.
Just a little.
I felt when you did stand up on it, I needed to throw the switch and put some platform into it, because being your standard horse link suspension, I felt like when you stand up it bobbed. And that doesn't bother me that much, so it's sort of an aspect of that suspension. It climbed really well seated, but when I stood up I needed to kind of like flip the lever and then scoot up the hill.
I'll agree. I think that's one of the ways I feel like it diverges from that XC category, that it is almost more the marathon subcategory of the XC. It's comfortable, but it's not necessarily a rocket.
Being girthier than either of you and kind of bow-legged, one of my pet peeves in life is lateral flex. And to me, whether it was the wheels or the frame, it felt like this bike was a little bit waggly. And by comparison to, say, the Top Fuel felt to me more purposeful in that way in terms of frame stiffness. And I'm not saying it as a negative with regard to this bike, I could feel some flex in there. I still thought it handled admirably and was a really fun, lively, playful bike to ride, but I could feel some flex in there.
And it's interesting to see the different experiences that we can have being our different sizes, because for me this felt like a very stiff bike, because again, I'm 125 pounds. I don't really get a lot of flex out of bikes, which for me, it's kind of nice when a bike does flex a little bit, because I get to actually get some of that extra feel.
That feedback, yeah.
So I think one thing that this bike is going to be really excellent at is just covering ground.
Yeah.
And it seems like that's where its focus is. You look immediately at the silhouette. It doesn't have this stretched, low DH bike kind of a look to it. It's, in fact, when I was ordering this, we were picking dropper lengths, and you had to run a 125 dropper length because the C-tube is kind of tall. It just has that traditional looking front triangle. One of the benefits of that is that they have 2 water bottle cages on it. So I think that speaks to the marathon, like a lightweight adventure bike kind of potential for the Signal Peak.
Other than that high standover, the Signal Peak's geometry was relatively stable. Not forgiving, but capable in the right hands. It's really a do-it-all sort of bike, which makes its pretty impressive price point all the more impressive.
It's also a $3,999 bike, complete as that one spec, which is GX rear derailleur and SRAM drivetrain. It's a screaming deal.
And this is one of the many bikes now that is going direct to consumer, which has obviously positives, usually around the price point. The negatives can certainly be when it comes to fit. You don't necessarily get to throw a leg over it.
But 30-day, no questions asked, money back guarantee. You don't like the way it fits, you don't like the way it rides, send it back. They'll pay the shipping.
And one of the things I found interesting was going through their website is they have a lot of inputs for different measurements, which, coming out of the era of the women-specific bike, I find very interesting, because we've often talked about what does women-specific mean, when what we really know is that a lot of times it's based on lighter weights, different measurements. And so the Fezzari website had the ability to enter in everything from shoulder width to inseam, riding style, weight, height, everything you could possibly want. One of the things that caught me off guard was that they asked you what gender you were, and underneath it they said women and men are built differently, thus they ride differently.
Yeah.
For me, in that moment, this went from being a bike that would be a potential bike I'd want to get to a bike that I would never want to get. Because we are built differently, we don't ride differently.
It's one of those disadvantages of the, I'll have to say, impersonal nature of buying a bike online.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, that's the nice thing, is when you walk into a bike shop, they're not necessarily talking to you as a bunch of numbers. They're talking to you as an individual. Similarly, they had a question in there about how old you are.
Yeah, I took that one personally. But that entire ordering process that they have is by and large really well thought out. And the options that they give you within that, where you can choose different brands of dropper post, you can choose with or without pedals, and their pricing on all of it is incredibly competitive. And to me, it's sort of a revelation as far as the thoughtfulness of an online buying experience. Much of it I think is really good, but the age question, a little tone deaf. The gender question, super tone deaf.
I just like the fact that we were able to put Maxxis DHF front and aggressor rear on this one. They get really granular about those component specs because we're in Park City, and if you're going to get a bike like this, you want all the help you can get. But if you're not here, you can pick something with a little more conservative tires. You can pick your dropper length. You know, it's one of those things that at a shop you could also do, but it's going to come with a significant cost penalty. Whereas when all of this stuff is happening at the wholesale level, you can get that custom experience at a little more reasonable price.
Consumer direct sales is nothing new, but it's something to think about. And once you're done thinking about it, the Signal Peak's a pretty safe bet. It's got a wide aptitude for being such short travel. Short enough that, call it what you want, it could even be a cross-country bike. We've got the full review and the rest of the Bible of Bike Test videos at bikemag.com.